And this one is a standalone expansion to the original game that borrows the same set collection and card drafting mechanisms, but then adds a lot more on top of it and brings in a lot more table presence. But if you're not familiar with how the original game plays, I'll just go ahead and explain that to you first so you have a good idea of what to expect. Because in this game, players are going to be drafting cards in order to build up their forest. There are a whole bunch of cards you can gain in this game, with most of them offering you some sort of positive set collection potential, but there are also cards you can gain that have negative effects as well. But something that I really do like about this game is that even if you gain those cards with the negative effects, you can often try to gain multiple of those cards or even combine those cards with other cards to change their effects completely, often into even a positive effect. This allows you to kind of roll with the punches if you happen to gain a card that you don't necessarily want, or to try and push your luck if you think you can get the required sets. But the way the players are going to be gaining cards is that there's going to be 3 different stacks located in the center of the table, and each player is going to be taking turns looking at the first stack, deciding if they want to take all those cards into their hand. If they do, they're just going to be taking those cards into their hand and then adding it to their tableau following the placement rules of those cards. But if they decide not to take that stack of cards, they're going to be putting it back down on the table face down, adding an additional card from the draw pile, and then they're going to be able to look at the second stack of cards. This repeats with the players looking at the second deck, deciding whether or not they want to take that into their hand, and if they don't, they're going to be putting it back down, adding an additional card. Same goes with the third stack, but if they pass on that final stack, they're just going to be drawing a card blindly from the draw deck. That's pretty much everything there is to a turn, but like I said, there's a whole bunch of different types of cards that you can add into your possession. There are the trunk cards that every player is going to be starting with 1 at the beginning of the game, but anytime that you gain a new trunk card, that allows you to either start a new tree, or you can add it to an existing trunk to make a tree taller. Each of those trunk cards will come with an associated amount of victory points, but then players can also gain canopy cards, and if they do draw one of these into their hand, they have to play it immediately, and if you're able to play it, it's going to be going on top of one of your trunks, or if you don't have a spot to put it, that canopy is going to be discarded. The nice thing about the canopies is it does multiply the points of each of your trunks by the amount dictated by the card. Players can also find themselves with different plant and weather cards that do offer different set collection potential, and you'll just be trying to collect multiples of those sets or pairs of certain sets in order to get the most victory points as you can. Wildlife cards that can grant you special abilities or scoring potential. And then there are the seed cards, which if you gain those will allow you to draw up a certain number of cards at the end of the round, but then you'll only be picking a few of those to add into your tableau, which is a really nice way to have more options with very little risk. But the forest is not always a safe place, and you might find yourself with drought, disease, or fire cards, which are going to cause you to potentially discard cards from your tableau. But they do have varying effects, and their effects can change depending on what other cards you're able to combo them with. Doing this just right can sometimes allow you to deflect those issues to your opponent players. At the end of the round, players will also be scoring any of their completed trees, and you'll be gaining the victory points for that and then putting an animal token onto that tree just to indicate that it's already been scored, because each tree can only gain you victory points once. The game continues like this over a series of rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, but there is also additional victory points you can gain for having the tallest tree or completing different specific objectives. The new version of the game is going to be playing very similar to that original game, but pretty much every aspect of it has been upgraded. The artwork is done by the same artist, but I would say that this newer version does feature more lush and vibrant art, and I do think it is a step up from the original, but also players are going to be building up their forests on their own personal forest board. This is going to massively improve the table presence of the game, because each player is essentially building up their own little diorama of their own specific forest, as they're going to be adding stackable tree tokens, fruits and plants that they'll be able to place into designated locations, and then also add various animals and wildlife that they'll be able to acquire throughout the game, with each of those animals coming with their own token and unique special ability that might even allow you to deploy them on other areas out on the table. Really nice looking game here with a solid improvement over the original. Of course, the whole new set of cards in this one is going to be introducing a bunch of new mechanisms and surprises and different ways to play the game in comparison to the original. So if you do own the original, both of these games might be enough to stand up on their own. But if you are looking to just add one of these to your collection, I do think that this one looks like the real winner here. And if you are interested in it like I am, you can find links to it in the description below, and of course click to get notified.